We want to welcome all of you who have tuned in today. My name is Jamar Nellums, and I'm with the Center on Knowledge Translation for Disability and Rehabilitation Research at the American Institutes for Research. And we're continuing the conversation about disability research and why it matters. And today we're speaking with Joe Mangum, and Joe is the father of, and he's also a stay-at-home dad. And today Joe will share his perspective as a parent and as a parent of two children with disabilities on how and why research matters to him and his family. Joe, welcome. We're really glad that you had the opportunity to join us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we like to start all of our conversations by asking folks to share a little bit about themselves. And in this case, we also hope that you will share a little bit about as well.
Well, my name is Joe Mangum. I live in Bull Verde, Texas. I'm married to my wife, Amanda, and I've got two kids. She's 7 years old, and my son is 5. They're good kids. My daughter has Down syndrome, and my son has autism.
And so knowing what today's topic is related to disability research, why is that important to you as a parent? And what additional type of significance might it have for you given the disabilities of both?
Well, I think it's the most important thing to me was just to learn and find out more about both of them, because both of them came on me kind of as a surprise. You know, whenever we didn't know I had Down syndrome until after she was born. And so, of course, you know, a few hours after she was delivered is when we got the news that she had Down syndrome. And of course, that's kind of shocking to anybody. And you kind of have to gather as much information as you can, but as fast as you can, just so you kind of know what you're dealing with. And then with, you know, it's kind of a slower, gradual deal because, you know, whenever he was a baby, we didn't know and weren't sure. But as it went on, his speech is what kind of led us in the direction of autism. And then, you know, just wanting to know because, you know, you always want the best for your kids, and it's hard to figure out where they're going to go at that point in their life. But, you know, as much research as you can find out there and information you can get, the better on the parent and the family and for the kids.
And so those are two very different situations, right? In the first situation, it was brand new to you. And I'm really curious, where did you go to find information, to find disability research? And how might that be different than once was born and where you went to find research for autism versus for Down syndrome?
Well, with Down syndrome, you know, of course, happened real fast, like I said. So I was still in the, you know, while she was in the NICU, I was doing a lot of my research, and I kind of started out, I think, where everybody else does, and that's with Google. And just kind of, you know, started at Wikipedia pretty much, just so I could figure out, you know, the definition exactly on what it was, and, you know, different names of what it was called. And then I started looking. There was the Down Syndrome Society, and going to all the main, I guess, you know, Down syndrome places out there, and that was one of the first ones that I found. And basically just started reading all the, you know, the first few paragraphs from a bunch of web pages, I guess, to find out, you know, exactly what it was and what I could do, and kind of what the extremes are, you know, the worst case scenario and maybe the best case scenario. Of course, it doesn't always give you that full information, but at least I had an idea where we were going with it.
Right.
And then it was a little bit different because, you know, it's one thing to be able to read a lot of information about autism, but it's different to watch videos. And so I went to YouTube, and I YouTubed a lot of autism kids that were kids of the same age as my son, just to see, you know, of how they acted and how he acted, and see if it was kind of the same. And that's kind of how I got started with that one.
Great. And so you also mentioned where you're from, and I know that that's a very rural area. So some of the ways in which you looked for research were technology-based, right? You got online to see what you could find. But does being in a rural area impact your ability to find and use disability research, or has it not made a difference?
I don't think it's really made a difference, but there's nowhere around here where I could actually go sit in front of someone and talk to somebody, or, you know, bring my kids or whatever. I'd have to go to San Antonio for that. So I guess there's nothing really available in my immediate area, but, you know, with the internet, you can do lots of cool and crazy things.
And so what are some of the questions that you ask yourself now? So now that both children are a little older,
Right.
what are some of the questions that you ask yourself, and how do you determine the quality of research, right? So even in the process of, okay, what am I looking for? What is it that I want to know? And even if I find what it is I want to know, what's the quality of what I find? How are you gauging the quality of the research?
Well, I think the main reason I research for my kids now, because I think I've learned a lot about autism. I've learned a lot about Down syndrome. I don't think there's any way you could know everything about those. They're very broad deals. But I think mainly now is just kind of how can I make them better, to where they can be independent and do stuff for themselves, and maybe get a job, maybe move out, maybe just be able to have a day-to-day conversation with their friends and family. I think I gauge my research and quality of my research is, of course, you can go down and read reviews. I think mainly testimonials where you see videos of parents and their kids. I think those are really good. Of course, social media has a lot on there. There's the Mighty. They got Down syndrome and an autism deal. You go to Autism Speaks. And there's just a lot of videos where you can, I don't know, watch a lot of videos that can be very encouraging to parents. But I think, whenever I go to websites and I'm reading, you can tell some websites, I guess, do it more for, I guess, the love of kids that have the problem. And some of them, it seems like, kind of do it for money.
Mm. Are there things that tip you off to that tip you off to where this is really a disability research focus, and it's about the quality of research, and it's about supporting efforts related to disability and disability services, versus this is really more folks who are trying to make money? Are there any themes that you see when you're noticing the difference between those two?
I'm not really sure if there's themes. I just think it's the way they go about presenting itself on the websites. I mean, you can tell the difference between websites quality and how much money that they're actually putting into it. But I think whenever you're going down and reading, to where it seems like they're just posting stuff, from parents to other parents or whatever like that, as opposed to, come do this and donate that, and maybe you can get these shirts and hats and koozies and all this stuff. And, I think going all those walks and stuff, I think it's a good thing. I think there definitely needs to be money in it, but I think it needs to go to more of research and development for helping these kids or people or whoever, in my case, my kids, and less towards of kind of like just a business that's run off of autism or Down syndrome.
So it's funny, you've talked about how you use research, and it's for a day-to-day desire and need, right, to provide the best for your children,
Right.
which is something every parent, or at least every parent I know, strives to do.
Right.
What would be some of the suggestions you would make to researchers about either what it is they could do differently related to research, particularly from an accessibility perspective, and a knowledge translation perspective, understanding as a layperson, I want to be able to understand what you've put out so that I can use it for my purposes. Or what is it that you think that you might recommend to researchers that they could keep doing so that it remains relevant to you? And
Well, I think mainly it's, to me, it'd be the best thing that's worked for me is watching videos and just reading people's stories, and kind of, what road they've been down and how it worked out, mainly that's with Down syndrome, those kind of videos. But then for, I like to compare him to other kids, and I think, being able to see videos of different kids, because the spectrum's huge, and, some of them are pretty far off and some of them are pretty close to being, like a regular kid. I hate to say that, but it's weird to say that, but it's kind of how I feel about it. But I think with autism, I like just to kind of gauge where he's at with kids that have the same disability that he does.
so it sounds like what you're saying is it's fine to have that data and that information, but put the human story with it so that I can see what that looks like and put faces right to the data, especially in the case of autism. That spectrum is so huge, to be able to allow you to recognize, all right, so this may be what this means for my child,
Mm-hmm.
and how I can take the next step that I want to take to support my child and his development. Is that accurate? Sound
Yes,
accurate?
definitely. And you know, a lot of kids, you know, they're all different, but I think and they learn in a different way. But I think a lot of autism kids learn in the same way as each other. And I think just getting, you know, showing other parents on ways that you can kind of open those kids up, I guess, would be good to see.
And so, speaking to other parents, are there any strategies or approaches other than some of what you've already talked about that you would either offer to them, or advice that you would offer to them as they're doing their own research?
I can't think of anything, you know, I would just tell them to be wary and read a lot. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I think if you can take in as much information as you can, but just weed out the stuff that you can tell really doesn't apply to your situation. And I don't think people are really trying to put out bad information. I just think that, you know, from their personal experience, that's what they've had. And I think people need to be able to see that too, because that might, you know, help them, because they might be going down that same road.
Mm. Great. Well, this has been very helpful, and we really appreciate having a parent perspective. We know that disability research is used in all different forms and aspects, and we're really appreciative of the time, Joe, that you've given us today to talk with you about it and to offer your perspective. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you very much again for having me.
Thank you to everyone for attending this video cast in our series on disability research, Why It Matters. After you viewed all 3 discussions in the series, we encourage you to fill out an evaluation form by following the link at the bottom of the slide. We'll email it to all who registered, and you'll also be able to find this link on our webcast information pages at www.ktdrr.org. As you know, this evaluation serves to help us plan our future events. In addition, you may also ask your questions to our presenters in this series. And please be sure to include your email address if you would like to directly receive responses back to your questions. Before we close, we'd like to thank the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, also known as NIDLR, for supporting our activities in these video, webcasts, and other events.